We do home church every Sunday morning at 10:30, and we just welcome you today. And we just wanted to talk about some things we probably talked about before, but that God has given me some new revelation on. Um, I love being retired. I get out of bed in the morning, make my bed, get my coffee, and come sit in here with the Lord, and I just ask Him what He wants to talk about. And sometimes, I'll read my Bible. Sometimes I will listen to some preaching. Sometimes I just sit in the quiet. It just depends on what I feel like that the Lord wants me to do. But today I want to go back on your health and your wealth and the things that the atonement bought for us. Whenever people in the Old Testament, when they did something wrong, they would bring a lamb in there, and the priest would have to examine it, and it would have to be perfect. It couldn't have a blemish or anything. He wasn't checking the people out, he was checking the lamb out. So that's why the atonement is so important, because Jesus was the perfect Lamb of God. He was 100% man and he was 100% God. But he chose to lay down his divinity to become a man so that we would not have to keep slaughtering goats and sheep, and we wouldn't have to keep shedding blood, because his blood paid for it all. And, you know, when it comes to healing and when it comes to your prosperity, you got to realize that in the atonement, all that was paid for as well. Um, People sometimes think that prosperity, when I talk about it, I'm being selfish. I'm not. I want you to be blessed. Just like when I quit working, I was a little panicky. I mean, I'd worked my whole life and I didn't want things to change for us, and I wanted to be able to go see my grandchildren. I didn't want nothing to change. And it hasn't. Nothing's changed. And the Lord even brought some things to mind that I think I have been supernaturally provided for over the last, since August 1st. And I know that it can happen. And people have the wrong conception. They think being poor is godly. It's not. Being sick is not God's will for you, because he wants you healed. There will be a fight. But the two things that have been fought the most in my lifetime that I've saw is health and wealth. Those are two things been fought the hardest. You can get saved and they're good job, you stay beat down, let's see how far you can stay beat down. That was not God's plan at all. It was not the way that he wanted it to be. He wanted for us to be, number one, full of wisdom and healthy and wealthy. He said, I wish above all things that you would prosper and be in good health. I think of prosperity or money is like a shovel. It's there to help you. It's there to help the church. It's there to help people. You can have money and it be detrimental to you, or you can have money and help the kingdom. You got a choice. We have choices with everything else, that where we're going to live, what kind of car we're going to drive, what we're going to do with our life. All those are our choices. God gives us a free will. But God is able to let us abound in every good work. He wants his people to meet the needs. Just like we have seen people give, and people donating to the mountains of North Carolina. But you know what? That's the way it really should have been from the beginning. The church should have took care of the orphans and the widows, and that was the way it should have been from the beginning. Because whenever we get people that are stuck on, there's some people who can't work and they need help. But the people that can work, a lot of times you'll see it generation to generation to generation. People are on the welfare system because mama was on it, or because grandmother was on it. If people need help, I'm all for helping them, and them getting what they need. But you can't be a big giver if you don't have any abundance. And there isn't any dollar bills in heaven. I mean, what we back it with, they walk on. So, the thing I tell people a lot of times is, Trust God for what you need. He knows what you need, but he really cares about what you want. I've seen that in my own life. I had a vision board, and about everything on that vision board, but two things has come to fruition in the last 3 years. So I know that He can and will give you your heart's desire. And you got to. Everybody thinks Jesus was poor. He was not. You do not gamble over somebody's robe if it was a rag. You don't. You just don't gamble over it. And people don't understand that Jesus was. I was studying this week about the Magi. Whenever they come to see Him, they were some of the wealthiest people in the world at that time. They brought enough money and frankincense and gold and myrrh to do Jesus his whole entire lifetime. It wasn't, just for his 1 or 2 years. It was he was sustained. Just like whenever God put Adam and Eve in the garden, He put everything there that they needed, and they could have been sustained forever. And there's no telling how long forever would have been had they not taken the bait. And that's the thing with anything we do. It can be a godly thing or it can be a worldly thing, and the choice is up to you. And I was sitting with the Lord, I think it was Thursday morning, and He asked me, He said, are you going to keep your eyes on religion, or you're going to keep your eyes on what my word says? Because religion and the word are two different things. Tradition and the word are two different things. I see it all the time. Joseph, when Jesus was born, my biggest thing is, how did they get all that wealth out when the angel told them to leave? Because that was a lot of stuff, and we just don't realize what provision was provided for Jesus at that moment. We don't have a clue. The studies that I seen said it was well over $5 million in our money. That's basically, I don't know if that's true or not. But in Isaiah 61, it says, that He brought good news to the poor. We don't have to be poor, but we need to be wise. A lot of our problems and things, and people don't like to hear this, is by our own choices. I've seen it over in my life again where we've made bad choices, and we had to work our way out of it. I mean, and I've figured out you can give your way out of a whole lot. And same thing with being sick. It said, the Bible says that He wants above all things, again, that we would be in good health. And you know what? We live and die by the words of our mouth. And that is one thing He has been telling me over and over again. I had ordered some books, and yes, they were on finances from some different ministers. And the common thread in that is that people are obedient. And one thing, this will be probably a little bit controversial, and I hope I can get it out right. I shared it with some people last week, and they just loved it. Tithing was a law, and the law was done away with whenever Jesus died on the cross. But just like seed time and harvest, the law of the tithe will remain in force forever. You can tithe and have your stuff protected, or you can eat your seed, eat your tithe, and God is not going to put a hedge of protection around nothing that you have. But the law of the tithe still is in effect. But the fact that you have to tithe is not. I choose to tithe because I want the Lord to protect me. He is my protector. His grace is always sufficient. But the law of the tithe stands. And if we could just realize what His blood paid for, we do not live up to our birthright. Whenever I go back to the little widow woman, and Elijah was sent to her, just her. He wasn't sent to everybody in that region. He was sent to her, because whenever he said, bake me a cake first, and she was obedient. She took care of the prophet. And when she took care of the prophet, God took care of her. And, she limited because Elijah told her, he said, don't borrow just a few. He said, borrow many. And I believe if she'd have had 100 more, the source would have not dried up until she had finished every one of those things, which leads me into another thought, is that sometimes we limit what God can do in our lives by our own thought patterns. You know, people say money is corrupt. Money is not corrupt, but money can corrupt people. The thing about it is you have to live under the blessing, because the blessing is ours. I mean, we're the seed of Abraham. If you go back to Deuteronomy 28, it tells you, you know, what the blessings are and what the curses are. And Jesus was made a curse, so none of that stuff in Deuteronomy will apply to us anymore because it's under his blood. And another thing I've been studying and really realized more than anything, especially with the crisis in the mountains, is prosperity is not about being blessed. It's about being able to help and bless others. Because if you can't pay your own bills, how are you going to help somebody else? And I mean, Don and I have helped people many times. We've paid light bills, we've paid phone bills, we've paid house payments for people, you know, and you know, that's an alm. And it says that if you lend to the poor, you lend to the Lord. And, you know, on the alms, you get back basically dollar for dollar. That's basically what you get. But if you sow above your tithes and you sow into the kingdom, it says you can get 30, 60, or 100 fold. And I'm after the 100 because I want to be blessed to be a blessing. I don't have to have a bigger house. I don't have to have a nicer car. I don't have to have anything. But I want to be able, if someone's in need, to bless them. And that was the scariest thing about giving up my job, was because I did make good money and I could help more then, you know, more when I was working. But really, you know what? I can see that God has opened another door that I can make the same amount probably in less time. But see, that's just God. He takes your natural and he puts his super on it. And that's what we call supernatural. Because you got to have something in the earth realm. You've got to have something to give. It's just like a farmer. He could have 1,000 pounds of corn seed sitting in his barn. But until it goes in the ground, he's not going to reap a harvest. And I do have a problem with mega churches who have all this money sitting somewhere, and there's homeless people, veterans that can't do no better, or sick people, and you know, they won't do anything for them because they want the money in the bank. I have a problem with that. We try to give it out as soon as we get it. You know, we try to find people to help. And people do give to us through PayPal and things like that. And I assure you that your money is used for good. And it says in Corinthians, it says, and God is able to make all grace, every favor and earthly blessing come in abundance to you, so that you may always, under all circumstances, regardless of the need, and that's in Corinthians 9 verse 8, have complete sufficiency in everything, being complete self-sufficient in him, and have an abundance for every good work and act of charity. And it is written and forever remains written. He, the benevolent and the generous person, scattereth abroad. He gave to the poor his righteousness, and it endures forever. Now, he who provides seed for the sower and bread for food will provide and multiply your seed for sowing. That is your resources. And increase the harvest of your righteousness, which shows itself in active goodness, kindness, and love. You will be enriched in every way, so that you may be generous, and this generosity administered through us is producing thanksgiving to God from those who benefit from it. For the ministry of this service offering is not only supplying the needs of the saints, God's people, but it's also overflowing. For the ministry of this service, I think that's pretty bold. It's not only for supplying the needs of the saints, quote, God's people, but it's also overflowing. And in the overflow is where I want to be. I don't know about you, but that's where I want to be. I want to be in the overflow. And, you know, God has laid healing on my heart. I've been studying it now for probably 6 or 7 years. And since I've been retired, I've been able to be active in people's lives, you know, and pray for the sick more than I ever have. And, you know, I went the other night to what they call a pumpkin carving, and I got to talk to so many people there about the Lord and about His grace. And, you know, the girl was there that we've been praying for her dad. And her dad wasn't supposed to be here 2 days, and he's still here. Matter of fact, he's at home. So, you know, God did a miracle there. He did something for her, not because of me, not because of anything I did, but just because when you pray and you believe in your heart, you know, everything is by belief. And, you know, and I'm reminded of the woman who came to Jesus, and Jesus said, you know, you're not a Jew. Basically, you don't deserve anything. And she looked back at Jesus and said, even the dogs eat the crumbs from the rich man's table. You know, I've thought about that many times this week, especially. We don't have to be as that woman was and have crumbs, because healing is our bread. The blessing of Abraham is our bread. It's the children's bread. And we are, if you are saved and in the household of faith, the blessing of Abraham should be on your life. And either you believe the Bible and its truth, or you don't. You know, you can't be in between and back and forth. You know, it said a man that is double-minded, he's unstable in all of his ways. And it says in Ecclesiastes 9:16, I ran across this verse and I thought, whoa. A poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are no longer needed. That's Ecclesiastes 9:16. True prosperity is on the inside, and the favor of the Lord on ideas and ability to prosper in any situation. That's where wisdom comes in, and you seek her first. Real prosperity is about blessing others and not possessing. And we don't never ever need to think that Jesus was poor, because he was not. And I go back to Peter, when Peter and the kingdom, something that stood out to me, it has stood out to me before, but not quite in this manner. Whenever Peter offered his boat to Jesus, when Jesus said, can I have your boat and go out and speak to the people from your boat? When Peter said yes, what happened was Peter's business changed kingdoms. It went from natural to supernatural, because Jesus was a supernatural person, and he was God. And whenever he stepped onto that boat, it changed kingdoms. And whenever Peter called out to his partners, it was Peter's voice, come help, not Jesus saying, come help. And they'd already fished all night and caught nothing. But he said, at your word. So, because Peter caught on to something real quick that we probably, a lot of us need to. There was something different about this man's words. He spoke with authority. We need to speak into others' lives and our own lives with authority. Again, I was kind of rattled to the core when I retired, because, you know, I'd worked all my life since I was 12 years old. I worked almost full time, and I didn't know what to do with myself. You know, I didn't, you know, after you clean out every closet, every drawer, you know, you run out of stuff to do. You're like, okay. And then an opportunity opened up to me. But it also gave me time to deal with a lot of things in my life that I had not dealt with. You know, and whenever things, when you're alone as much as I am through the day, because my husband works, you know, it's just you, God, the dog, and the horse. I find myself talking to the Lord a whole lot more. I mean, just carrying on a conversation, you know, about things. And I think I was washing dishes or putting dishes up or something. And the Lord just spoke to me, and he said, what do you think happened to those partners of Peter? whenever Jesus stepped into his boat. It was like an overflow, because one encounter with God, one encounter with Jesus, set Peter and his family, and I believe the other guys that were with them, set them up that their families would be taken care of through his entire ministry. I believe one encounter. And because you know what? If they happen to be cleaning and this is something the Lord taught me and Don years ago. If you don't take care of what you have, how can he trust you with more? And that goes for your yard, your house, your car, whatever. You need to take care of your stuff. And Peter was doing the natural thing. He was taking care of his nets, And if he hadn't been taking care of his nets, I don't believe, the nets may not have held all those fish. Peter's boat was about to sink, so his voice called his partners in his business in to help. And the whole lot of them was blessed. And back then, fishing was the major thing that they did. That's how most of the men worked, is they worked to fish and to take it to the market to sell. And every transaction that we do in life has something to do with business. It has something to do with your income, your health. All these things are by choice. And I just wanted to reiterate today that God died for a whole lot more than we're reaping. And, I know this is kind of quick for me, but I have taught on healing and I have taught on prosperity till actually I'm probably like blue in the face. And, and I just want people blessed. People don't have to be busted and disgusted. I believe some of the things we're going to see in this season is new limbs come on people. I believe we're going to see a lot more cancer healed. I believe that the Lord is going to do things through his people that we've educated ourselves so much out of the supernatural things of God. He is a mystical being. He has no beginning, he has no end. You can't get much more mystical than that, But I believe in the last days when he is pouring out his spirit. It's not that he's gonna anymore. I believe he is. I believe he's teaching. He's hidden a lot of folks that I know. He has trained people in secret. Paul was 14 years being trained before he ever stepped out into ministry. And, no matter what you're going through today, it makes no difference if it's a health issue, if it's paying your bills on time. I don't care what it is. Get in your word, get you a scripture, and don't let nothing else come out your mouth. That's, that's one thing I know that works. And I just, I want you to be blessed, and I want you to be well. And I want you to have the desires of your heart. But I know somebody who wants that even more than I want it for you, and that's Jesus. He died, he shed his blood to pay for that. So if you're watching and you need prayer, I'm going to throw my phone number out there, 704-224-1517. I'll be glad to pray with you. I'll be glad to talk with you on the phone. Just call me. And I would be glad to do that, because people sometimes just need somebody to say, hey, God's still in control. And the one thing I will end with is, vote. Sleeping giant is the church, and we need to rise up and stand up, and we need to go vote. Vote your conscience and vote biblically. If you call yourself a Christian, you need to vote biblically. And I'm not into politics. People who know me know my husband's big into that. I am not. But I believe you shouldn't fuss if you don't go out and do your part. You need to do your part. So with that in mind, I just want to thank you for tuning in today. And I want to thank you for the people who continue to call us and support us. And anything that we could ever do for you, just let us know. We'd be glad to pray with you, talk with you. And I hope you have a blessed day. I know I am. And we will see you next Sunday morning at 10:30. God bless.